We put the idea of menopause being an older lady thing, even though I would say this is what perimenopause looks like, because I'm in perimenopause. And so it's the idea that if you learn ahead, you feel so much better equipped.
Welcome back to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast. I'm your host and Bold Moves mentor, Kristen Rocco. Thanks for tuning in to the show where we actively reject the narrative of a midlife crisis and instead we step into our emboldened midlife clique. Being here and tuning in is your personal reclamation. It's your commitment to stop repeating the patterns keeping you stuck in identity that no longer fits and to start taking the bold micro actions that create the life you want on your terms. As we lean into that personal power and gear up for our bold moves, many of us are going to collide with an invisible biological speed bump we're not wholly prepared to navigate. And that's perimenopause and menopause. In fact, yesterday I was getting my hair highlighted and mentioned to my stylist that I'd be interviewing a physician who left her traditional practice to support women in this exact phase. I mentioned it in hour one of my appointment, and all we could talk about for the next 2 hours was this conversation around perimenopause and menopause. We talked about how women don't always know what's happening in their bodies and it's hormonal, the symptoms that are all over the board, her friend who couldn't get out of bed from the exhaustion of it, and how much HRT personally helped her feel like herself again. This is the exact conversation happening below the surface for millions of women. The 50 million women navigating this while building their careers need to feel supported, not just by their close friends, but by their doctors, their employers, and the healthcare system at large. This topic needs so much more airtime than it's gotten, and that's what we're here to do today. So, to help us map out that transition, I am thrilled beyond words to welcome Dr. Sarah Berg. Dr. Berg is a board certified OB-GYN, a certified menopause practitioner, and the visionary founder behind Selfority. After more than a decade in clinical medicine, seeing brilliant, capable women quietly assuming they had to manage this transition alone, she made it her own massive, bold move. Sarah left the traditional practice to launch Selfority to close the information gap her patients kept describing. Through her platform, she translates evidence-based clinical guidance into clear, actionable education women can use in their life, the workplace, and the exam room to get back to feeling better. With that, Dr. Berg, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being
Oh
here.
my gosh, thank you for having me on. I'm honored. And I just want to, so for anyone actually visually watching, I've got this cute little bandage thing on. I just had surgery. It has to be left open. Otherwise, I would have worn way cuter top. But I just had to be here. I didn't want to miss this.
Thank you so much, Sarah. You look amazing. And, these things come up in all of our lives. So show up for who you are.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I am very excited that you're here for all of the reasons I just read in the introduction. Your work not only lays the groundwork for this vital conversation we're about to have about perimenopause and menopause, but what's so interesting also is that you're a bold mover, someone who steps out of her comfort zone to listen to the whisper inside of her to pursue an idea, goal, or dream. And right here on the show, that's what it's all about, inspiring, empowering, and championing women who do just that. So that's really where I'd love to start today, Sarah. We'll get into menopause and perimenopause soon, but you spent a decade in the clinical gynecology practice. So how did you first get interested in women's health, and what did your medical career look like leading up to the shift that you're in now?
So actually, when I went into medicine, I thought that women's health would be the last area I'd want to be in. And that's one of those things like you say one thing, your life says, haha, that's not for you. My father's a cardiologist, so I really thought that's what I'd seen. And he is an excellent cardiologist and he loves his patients. And he's why I went into medicine. And I was like, oh, good people do cardiology. So that's what I'm going to do. went to medical school, found out that bored me to tears. And then I had this rotation in women's health, which my father had literally set me up to hate because he was like, that was so overwhelming. It was scary. I was like, and he used to have like nightmares because it was so much going on at once. Then that's when I
Mhm.
realized a big difference between myself and my father and most women and men. I can multitask like the best of them. You can, we all know, like we can have like 16 tabs open on our brain at certain points in our life, and that works well for us.
Yeah.
Sometimes people need to be one task at a time, and that's how they do things. Well, we're different people, so we have different viewpoints. And then when I got into the meat of it, when I really started going beyond, like, oh, it's cool, I can do surgery, I can take care of patients, I can deliver babies, and I really got into the root of women's health, that's when I realized not only was it a cool job, it was my passion.
So then you started in a clinical practice, and I guess you were doing all of the things that our gynecologists do today. Is that right?
Exactly. I was doing the full spectrum, taking care of women from, 11 years old until like 101 years old and
Mm.
loving it. But one thing I realized pretty quickly was that this conversation around my late 30s to 50-year-old women was starting to feel like I was having it over and over. But I was having it with a woman that felt like she had to, like, she felt shame around having the conversation. She felt like she had to sneak into the conversation, even in the clinical office where that's what we were there for, to take care of her. I called it the slope shoulders. I would have a patient, I'd see her year after year. And if you have a gynecologist that you jive with, oh my gosh, I just used an old word, but jive with, you sometimes going to the appointment is more like catching up than having a real exam. And when you have a question, you have a question, but it's really more like, hey, how are your kids? What trips did you go on? Like, how's your work going? And that's okay as long as everything's routine. They would come in the next year, and I call it the slope shoulders. They come in face down, shoulders down, and they weren't themselves. But if we hadn't mentioned it, they may never have said anything about it. And when we rooted down in, their stories were very similar. They had lots of weird things going on. The statement they said is, I didn't feel like myself, and they felt that it was their fault, and they felt like something was wrong with them because they weren't hearing this story in the public domain. And I was going through, and first of all, I was realizing I hadn't gotten enough education in my medical training to really understand it, which, you know, medical training is a lot and we learn a lot, but the fact that that wasn't focused on bothered me, and the fact that there was so little education to the patient that they felt ashamed, and they might not have said anything if someone didn't pull it out of them, which is also the other side of the problem that was bothering me. So I thought, first, I need to learn more on my own, which is hard in medicine because we're working 60-hour weeks. You have a family, you've got so much going on. I was like, but this is an important part of my training. Not, every woman will go through this if she lives long enough. So it's not a niche area. And I felt I was underserving them if I didn't train more. And then the other side of it is like, how do I help women understand that this isn't a shame topic, that they're not alone, and to see themselves in this and advocate for themselves so that they don't have to come into this part of their life feeling overwhelmed.
So you're sensing that your female patients were struggling with something that they really didn't understand. How were you able to help them in those moments? What was the approach then? And then was that tied into your realization that there was another way that you could serve them?
Yes. So my approach in the office was something that I just feel like is a personal responsibility. It was listening and engaging. So a
Mhm.
lot of it is, and you kind of pointed it out when you told your hairdresser you're having this conversation. Sometimes just eking that door open is all you have to do. And then they feel like they can let it out and let the floodgates happen. And I realized that was the barrier. The feeling like they weren't allowed to talk about it or didn't know where. Sometimes they'd be like, I don't know if this is the right doctor to talk to about this, because they might be talking about symptom they think belongs in a different box. and having that
Mm.
conversation saying like, "Oh, actually, these usually all are contained in the same box. It just doesn't no one's kind of giving you that information, so you don't realize where to go." And that was my like, that little brain moment where you're like, "Ding,
Mhm.
there is a responsibility to every human, but especially the women living this, that we are missing, that they are missing." And I can see it now. And, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it's like, there needs to be action taken in this area.
Yeah. So give us a peek a little bit inside that decision making process, right? So you realized it. And I think everybody, as they're making a bold move or they have an idea for a bold move, it's a
Mhm.
realization. How long did you sit with that? And what did it feel like? Did it start as a whisper and then progress? Take me in the
Oh,
moment.
yeah. So I everyone is different and we all experience our bold moves in different ways. I had a lightning moment and then I had the settle. And the settle for me was figuring out, okay, I see the issue. I understand it from the inside, but what can I do about it? How do I approach this? And you start to think in your little box, what can I do in the office? What can I do in the space I'm in? And that was the starting point. And I realized that wasn't going to cut it. So then you start to let your brain open, but you still have the parameters of who you think you are. I've been doing this for 15 years. Like, am I really going to uproot? Am I going to change? It feels scary. And it feels like, am I the right person to do this? Like, is this an idea that I should give to someone else that may be better at it? Because we all have that self doubt. We all have that feeling like, oh, but I'm a doctor that lives in this box, so I can't be a business person or an advocate or do legislation or do those things. I put a lot of can'ts on myself. Um, and I, from seeing so many women, we can't ourselves to death. And so I thought about the way I thought about the way I speak to the women I love. I thought about the way I speak to the women I served. And I said, I'm not speaking to myself the way I would to these people or to my daughter. So, what can I say to myself to say, you have this click, you have this knowledge base. What can you do? What can which is, I love the phrase, bold move be to go from this square to this hole? Because I sometimes felt like I was a square peg in a circular hole and I wanted to really fit I wanted my life work to fit the hole I felt like I belonged in. So I pondered on it, I worked on it, I thought about it, and I always say it was a slow move that ended up in a fast move. And I think a lot of people understand that. I perforated over, I thought about it, I kept going, and then I was doing things in my personal life to try to change the narrative for myself. And one of them was exploring being outside more. And I love trail running. So going there and riding. And these are things I loved. And so I found what I call adult women's summer camp. And I went to this retreat called Wilder. It was in the backwoods of Oregon. It was run by Lauren Fleshman, and I'm a fangirl of her. She's a major runner, and I fangirled over her and her book. And I was like, running, writing, a really cool leader, sign me up. And I actually was on the wait list and had to get off the list. So I felt really privileged to get to go. And I show up here and I've got that idea and I've never said it out loud to anyone. And then I meet this woman named Rochelle, and she's a stranger, but she is someone that you like, when you meet someone, you're like, that person, I love them. They've got great energy. And you kind of are like, and she's still a stranger, so I can tell her something and then maybe never have to face it again. So once I said it out loud to her after we had gotten to know each other for one full day at adult summer camp, it was like a load lifted, and it also was the fire. I was like, I said it out loud and someone didn't give me the look like, "Are you crazy? Leave clinical medicine and do that?" And that was my spark. And that was my going from the pondering to like, here we go. I'm gonna make this happen.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Saying it out loud sometimes can and getting it out of your body can actually have a really important impact on you to be like, "Oh, somebody else actually sees the value of my idea and they're validating that I can go from, can I actually do this, to how can I afford not to do this? I'm the person for this job.
Exactly. And you know it inside, but we also sometimes
Awesome.
don't say it.
Yes, exactly. So, what was the moment, Sarah, that you were like, I'm just doing it? In the woods, you kind of got some more confidence, I
Yeah.
assume. But then what happened after that?
Well, I'm telling you, I just did the darn thing. I said, okay, here we go. And I started really where I'd been thinking for a while. I said, let me make a course. Let me think through what would be if I had all the time in the world to give a woman education on her own body, just like when girls go through menarche, they have like, they go to that video in the
Mhm.
awkward room and they have it. I was like,
Yeah.
let's do the adult version, but let them do it on their own timeline, however they want it, stop and go in their earbuds so no one has to hear it. It can be their thing. And so I made two courses. I made a little intro one, just like a touch on it, and then I made what I call my
Mhm.
master's class, where I said, "Here's the whole kit and caboodle."
Mhm.
Like learning everything, and I did it in a way just like I talk to my patients in the office. I like to tell stories. I like to make
Mhm.
analogies. I did a lot of visuals because I know that I always tell people I spent 4 years in medical school, 4 years in residency, and I am a woman. And I am still learning every day new things about what it is to be a woman.
Yeah.
So just because you're a woman, you don't naturally know all this. And we are beautifully and wonderfully complicated. And that is what makes us wonderful. But it also doesn't mean you intuitively know. And the people felt really weird that they didn't know these things. So I tried to walk it through it in a way of like, I don't, no one should expect you to know this. So here's what I'm giving you, from like the question you would be too scared to ask because you feel silly, all the way to like the nitty gritty of why.
This is so helpful. You just started somewhere,
Yes.
right? You used all of your expertise and your knowledge. You took, okay, well, here's a period of time where women go through a transition. This is what's available to them. It's not available to women going through a transition in perimenopause and menopause. So I'm going to kind of leverage this playbook and move forward. And action, I believe, creates clarity in a lot of ways. And then you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then before you know it, things keep evolving. So that sounds, that's such a great tactical playbook for listeners to be like, just start somewhere.
Well, and you're exactly right. When I engaged in this, I thought, oh, I'll make a course. But and I know that once you see something, it like opens more doors. So I started with the course, and the course was meant to say, hey, this is how we can have good conversations with our doctor. From the doctor side, this is what would make, and I even write in there, like, here's the questions to ask so that you have the best conversations. Your doctor doesn't want to be your adversary. It's just sometimes when the communications don't mesh, you're not getting
Mm-hmm.
what you need. But then that opened more of a door. And I thought about these women I saw in the office, these strong, powerful women in every stage of work life, from the CEO of a company, the janitorial staff, the HR manager, all of them coming with the same story. And I thought, we don't just live outside of the office. We also live in the office. So
Right.
then my next thought was like, okay, then this shouldn't be their responsibility. They've learned all this, but they shouldn't be responsible for educating their workplace about it. That's not okay. And that's not really fair on them. So then I
Right.
said, you know what? Let's bring it to the workplace. Let's make it where they can have the handoff approach and everyone learns about it, just like we learn about people have babies and what to do after and how to care for them. Let's do the same, because I do not believe this
Mhm.
is an issue where people are purposefully making it harder. I
Mhm.
think it's there's a lack of education on for everyone, so people just don't know. So they see this woman who was like the leader of the group, taking on command, doing all these things, and then they see her have this dip, and because she's not going to bring it up because she feels like that's not where a place to bring it up, it gets not understood, and they don't know, so they may say, man, she doesn't seem engaged in her job anymore. I don't think she likes being here. All those very negative statements because they don't know any better. And so it's a perfect storm
Mhm.
for someone to feel pushed out or to leave because they don't feel like they have a place there anymore.
This is a great transition point to talking about the reality of women experiencing perimenopause and menopause in the workplace. So I'm so glad we're going to be able to get to do that. So again, our listeners can feel less alone in this experience and really understand what's happening in their body. You just wrote a Times article called "The Menopause Conversation Still Has One Major Blind Spot." And in that, it was fantastic from top to
Thank
bottom.
you.
But I picked out two paragraphs that really stood out to me. You said, as a clinician, I see this pattern: mood disruption, mistaken for personal failure, real professional decisions made in response to something a woman has no name for all the time. And then later you go on to say, women are stepping back from leadership roles, withdrawing from opportunities, and quietly losing trust in their own judgment in response to a biological event nobody told them was biological. Wow. That made me sit up immediately and realize that there's a staggering professional cost of this. It's kind of interesting timing, too. You know, many women are finding their way again after experiencing the motherhood penalty. And then they are hit not too long later with another biological toll in the menopause penalty. So, what's happening to the 50 million women in the workplace navigating this? How is our biology in midlife quietly impacting our careers? Shed some light on this topic for us, Dr. Berg.
Well, the thing is, it's only quiet because no one's talking about it. Because internally, it's loud and it's angry. Um,
Oof.
Anyone who's gone through this, I mean, it's a spectrum. There's no one size fits all. Not everyone has one or all the symptoms, but most women, 92% of women, have symptoms during the menopause transition. So, and that's just the ones that say it on a survey. So there may be more that didn't even know that that was a symptom. So they didn't know to check it.
Right.
So again,
And you know what? Maybe we should step back too and define perimenopause and
oh,
menopause, the
that's a
difference.
great.
Because again, we're assuming that people know that, but maybe they don't.
Exactly. And that's truly like section one of my course because you're right. People assume and then they feel silly if they don't, but no one laid it out for us. So why would we know? So the timeline is your perimenopause is the stage after you are not in your normal flow of cycles. The hormone shifts are just starting to change, and the why makes it make sense. So we are born with a certain number of eggs. I call it the eggs in a basket. And literally, how many eggs you have, the most is when you're actually in utero. So, like, we have a finite amount, and you dump a lot of them before you hit your periods. But once you hit your periods, you have like a certain amount that's going to last you the rest of the time. So, it's not a you issue, it's a supply issue. So, when we get to the lower end of the bucket or the supply, your body is working harder to make that normal cycle happen because it's reaching further in the bucket for the eggs. And so when the eggs aren't at the top, it's harder for them to do the normal process. So perimenopause is what I call the reaching into the bottom of the egg sac. And you're reaching for the egg, and those ones have been squashed and sat on for a while, so they may not be the best ones you've ever had. Some of them are great, but some of them have like seen better days because they're sitting on the bottom. And so that's why sometimes the cycle comes, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you'll have symptoms, sometimes you don't, because it's just how your body's responding to that. Menopause is literally a one day in your life. It's 12 months after your last cycle. That's the whole definition. It's completely clinical. It's really no way to say that this is going to be the day you hit menopause. We really are talking more about perimenopause, the time leading up to it, and postmenopause when you're through it. Because finding that one day, it's kind of hard. I mean, and most people don't know until after it's already happened. So that's why I usually like to call this all the menopause transition, to just give it one name for the whole kit and caboodle. Because most people have symptoms in perimenopause, and
Yeah.
some people have symptoms leading into postmenopause. But most of the time, the symptoms we think about resolve on their own in postmenopause, except for one or two. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. I like the menopause
Mhm.
transition because it just makes it all one long phase instead of 2 separate
Yes,
phases.
and it's actually one of the medical terms. I didn't make it up, I wish I had, but it's a real medical term, so that's why I just use it because it can get really confusing when someone's like, "Wait, is this perimenopause? Is it menopause?" And they're just a sliding scale. It should because that one day is really hard to
Mm.
define.
Thank you for stopping so we could define those. I think that's really helpful for women to understand. And so now let's talk about some of the ways in which it's impacting women at work. When you were experiencing in your clinical practice women coming in, what were they reporting in terms of how this was affecting their daily responsibilities?
Pretty much across the board, it did. Everyone, again, had their different stories and different ways, but the top ones I'd hear over and over first is sleep. Menopause menopause transition usually affects sleep. There's multiple different reasons, but it could be the hot flushes they have at night, which we call night sweats. It could be that their alarm clock in their brain has switched forward, so they like to wake up at 3 a.m. And it could be that they're not getting into the deep sleep they're used to for a multitude of reasons. So any little thing will wake them up, and then they're up and going. And so sleep is a big one. And if you don't sleep, I mean, when people have a baby and they come back to work, everyone I would say gives them grace because they know they haven't slept well for a while. Well, the menopause transition for women is 4 to 8 years average, and for many a lot longer. That's a long time to possibly not be sleeping well. So, but no one's thinking about that and giving that person grace, being like, oh my gosh, they're not going to be at their full thing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They're going to be losing it. They don't see it, so they don't think about it. Um, hot flushes, the basic one, the one everyone thinks about, but it affects every different level because not only the hot flush when it's happening, but the mental load of thinking it's going to hit me when I'm in the meeting, when I'm speaking in front of everyone. And it's hard to concentrate because you're so focused on the idea of hoping this doesn't happen to you that that's all you're taking in. And then the reason I wrote the article is because it's probably one of the number one symptoms that people came to me with when they finally felt open to say it. And people think about mood issues and anxiety and depression, and those are absolutely common during the menopause transition, and we have great data on it. But really, the way people explain it, some of the mood symptoms is it's this fiery rage that comes out of nowhere, and you know it's not your normal response to something, like the stapler isn't staplering, or the button on the elevator isn't going fast enough. You have enough adult information to say this is not a reasonable response, but you're not able to contain it in that moment. And that's the thing that I think really scares people is they're saying, I have this inflamed inside of me and it comes when it comes. I know rationally this doesn't make sense, but that doesn't change my immediate response. My rational brain has to take a second to get a hold of it. And that's showing up if they want it to or not. And that's really hard to hide.
That's a lot of emotional weight
Yes.
that women are carrying silently
Mhm.
while they're also trying to do all their obligations at work. How is that impacting their progression, and their ability to do the job? I mean, I think there are some staggering statistics behind this. Am I right,
Oh,
Dr. Berg?
absolutely. The number one thing is sometimes it stops people in their tracks. So I want to say 2 out of 5 women at least consider leaving the job they're in, even if they were happy with it, just because they say, I am not capable of handling this load anymore. And the thing is, they're not telling their boss, I'm leaving because of menopause. They'll say, oh, I'm leaving because I'm a caregiver, or this is a different opportunity, or something like that. So they're leaving because of symptoms, but their employer doesn't really know that because no one's going to say, hey, it's my biological thing going on. And they might not even know it. And a lot of women call it blowing up their lives. They say they have this like a sudden, and it comes in all forms. They'll say, like, I divorced my husband, I left my job, I like all these things happen. And then a year or two later, when they've had a chance to really explore what's going on in their body, maybe have a treatment plan, they say, some of them said, hey, I needed to explode my lives. That was exactly what I needed. But a lot of women say, I wouldn't have necessarily done it like that. And a lot of that was with the job. And on the other side of it, if your employer or your coworker doesn't understand what's going on, they may make you feel like you should push out, or they may fire you because they think that you're not interested in your job anymore, because you think you're hiding this, but you can only do so much for so long before this internal feeling starts to show up in how you show up at work. And there's a lot that can be done for this. It's not saying, oh, you're, and that's what I hate is when women say, oh, I get to this point and now I'm like, I finally am, at this level of the job. I know what I'm doing. And then this hits me too. What a great thing. But there are some superpowers to this point in life. And if we only acknowledge the hard stuff because we push it down and we shame it, we don't get to see our superpowers. And they're still there, but we have to be able to acknowledge this other side to be able to use our superpowers.
I'm so glad that we can, help our listeners today understand that what they're experiencing may be related to this if they didn't have a name for it before. And so now we can start talking about solutions, which there are plenty of solutions, I think, out there, Dr. Berg. And I know that you have an initiative, Menopause at Work, so I want to get into that. But there's two sides of this coin. And I've said this around, every kind of professional issue that comes up. There's the thing that we can do individually to take it in our own hands and help ourselves and advocate for ourselves. And then there's the responsibility, or we hope, on the side of the corporate systemic level.
Mhm.
So I would really like to talk about both of these because, yes, we can do things individually, but also I know you're here to also spark this conversation with corporations about what they can do.
Oh my gosh, yes. And exactly right. It is not a you problem. It's an education problem. And it's not a you education problem. It's an everyone should know. I would say, because it's not like teaching someone about menopause won't benefit them no matter what, because there is likely someone in every person's life that they love, that they care about, that's going through this. So thinking about bringing this initiative to work isn't just for work, it's for your whole life. It's like kind of the opposite. Like, we think we can keep menopause in our own lives without bringing it to work. That doesn't work. We think we can keep work at work, but it goes into our lives. It's a back and forth. So the point of what I want to bring with menopause at work is the idea of educating everyone, so that the person going through it doesn't ever have to feel like they have to educate, and also doesn't feel like they have to put their personal medical information out there to get the workplace adjustments they need. And it's telling the
Mhm.
workforce, this isn't just a sweet thing to do. We have excellent evidence and data that shows when you support women during the menopause transition and when you show them that they're superpowers, employers that keep women in the workplace do 30% more financially than those that don't. So we are a superpower. They need.
Well, think about it. These are senior level women with decades of experience at this point.
Mhm.
And if they opt out because they're facing biological issues, hormonal issues that they don't understand and they just think it's a them problem, those corporations are losing wisdom that will help their organizations progress and grow. And so it is of benefit to the organization to take this seriously and tackle it just like you would any other healthcare issue.
Exactly. It's not only the wisdom that they're losing, it's also that every single time they lose someone, it costs them
Mhm.
a year and a half to 2 years worth of salary to replace them. Think about the recruiter, the finding the person, the signing bonuses, of getting all that started, then the runway for that person to even kind of get acclimated, much less know the job like that person that left the job. That's a lot of spending.
A lot. That's a lot. It's yeah. And I'm so glad that, again, we're just now this conversation is bubbling up to the surface. It's not living beneath the surface anymore. And change takes time, but hopefully through work that you're doing and others are doing in this space, there also there's a menopause society, I believe, that you're part of. Is that right? So actually, can you kind of talk us to us about how the space is evolving and what shifts and changes are
Oh my
coming?
goodness, yes. Okay, so I think that's a great question because when we talk about my credentials, I say I have a menopause certificate. And that doesn't mean a lot if you don't understand where it came from. So there is a Menopause Society. So it's an organization that said, I think 17 years ago, menopause needs its own space. Currently, in medicine, if we want to learn more than our residency, we do something called a fellowship. So it's extra training around it. Even though it should be a fellowship, we don't have that yet. So they kind of built that space in and said, not only physicians, but anyone in healthcare. So a nurse, a pharmacist, physician, PA, anyone that works in healthcare, if you want to show that you care about menopause and that is an important part of how your practice should work, you get the certificate. So I joined this community. I took the test, I get the certificate, but that also, just like anything in medicine, it doesn't mean you get it and forget it. You have to keep up with the literature, take follow up tests, do those kind of things to prove that you're keeping up as well. So it's not only saying I know it, it's that I promise to continue knowing it. And that's the important part. But this opened my eyes. And then also the idea that why doesn't the medical schools and residencies have more of this education when it's 51% of our population that will go through it? So I've started working in the legislative world as well to say, not only, I'm glad I have it. I think that's important, but there's only one of me to every 30,000 women going through menopause. And that math
Hey.
doesn't math. So we need to find better ways to get every physician educated so people don't feel like they have to go to a menopause specialist to get the care they deserve. And I think that's the step that I'm really working on. I'm speaking at a congressional briefing next week, specifically saying this is why training the physicians is important. And it's not because they don't want to be trained, it's because the system wasn't built to train them. So it's kind of saying we need to make it important in every avenue. We need to make it important for the
Yeah.
person, for the politics, and I'm talking in legal change as well, and for the organization. And so it's again that idea, like once you see the problem, you got to get in there. You got to root it out. Yeah, you make the bold move. If you had told me 2 years ago I was going to be speaking at a congressional briefing, I'd be like, I don't do politics. That's not my thing. I don't know anything about it. But I knew this needed to be spoken, and I knew I had the voice to say it. So I'm taking that bold move.
Full body chills right now, Dr. Berg, actually, because, so many things are running through my head, and we certainly don't have all the time in the world to go down the rabbit hole of why this field hasn't been studied up until a decade ago. And I would love to get into that one day, but that's not the nature of this
Yeah.
show. um, anyway, thank you for your work and for helping to change the policy and the legislation so that we can have access to what women need, as every woman is going to hit this phase in their lives, and so we should be supported. um I have asked some friends, as I knew you were coming on, what are their questions about menopause and perimenopause, or the menopause transition, as you call it, or as the world
We're
calls
just
it.
using it now. It's
um,
great.
and I'm using it. Yeah, we're using it, the menopause transition. Um, so I'd love to do this kind of rapid fire
Mhm.
style and just get your thoughts on these questions. So we did talk already about some symptoms of menopause, but I would really be curious to know, what are some of the lesser known symptoms that blindside women? Hi, friend. It's Kristen. I hope you're really enjoying this episode. I just wanted to take a quick pause from today's conversation to ask you a question. How many times have you listened to a story on this show and seen yourself in my guest because their story was so relatable? You've had a similar experience and you thought, I know exactly how she feels. I relate to her experience and I know I need to do something to change my life too. But then life gets lifing and you go right back to ignoring that inner whisper about what's next. You know where I'm going with this, right? You find yourself wondering, okay, Kristen, sure, but how do I actually do this without completely burning out? I see you and I've got you. Inspiration is great, but it doesn't change your life without action. That's why I write the Bold Moves newsletter. I personally distill these episodes into the exact mindset shifts and bite sized micro actions you can start using to make the change you're craving. It's the clarity and the mentorship you need to pursue your bold move as the main character of your life. So stop waiting, stop wondering, and together let's make your bold move happen. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe right now, and I'll see you in your inbox. All right, now let's get back to this conversation. What are some of the lesser known symptoms that blindside women? And I'll give you kind of a personal thing that maybe I'm going through right now. Last week, starting on Thursday, I got exceptionally tired. And actually, it started Wednesday night. All of a sudden, I felt like I just hit a wall.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, obviously, I'm very tired. So I'm going to get a good night's sleep. So I go to bed Wednesday night, get up, and it's still with me. I'm like, that's odd. Okay, well, maybe, I just haven't been getting enough sleep over this week. So do it again Thursday night. Friday, I could barely move. Literally, I was so tired. And it kind of dawned on me that potentially this could be a symptom of perimenopause at this point for me. So, is that a symptom? And then what are some other symptoms that people aren't even familiar with or thinking about could be connected to this transition?
Oh, absolutely. Now, first of all, I will say if you have a symptom, go get it checked out and make sure there's no other reason behind it, because I always say there's two camps. The nothing is menopause and everything is menopause, and we've got to find the middle. But always double check, because could it be a thyroid? Could it be anemia? Could it be a vitamin D? Could it be a magnesium? Could it be you're not sleeping well? Because those are the reasons. And that's why my doctor brain goes. I'm like, ooh, spiraling. It's so much fun. It's like detective work. But that could be some of the ones that I feel like people are never expecting. I know we talked about rage, hot flashes, some of the brain symptoms, brain fog, word finding. If you've ever had a kid and you like feel like the word is in the universe so you can't reach it, same thing, still going. Vaginal dryness, increased urinary tract infection. So even if you didn't really have them before, you might have them more now. And if you had them before, you're likely to have them more recurrently. Joint aches and pains, skin changes, voice changes. And that can be really big if you're a speaker in theater, sing for a living. I mean, these are huge issues for their livelihood. I call it floodgate bleeding, but most people, when they go through the transition, their bleeding changes and they feel like they have a hose, and that scares them because they go on the internet and they think they now have cancer, and it's often one that we have to talk to. But those are, like you said, we were rapid firing, and those are some of the ones. But it's like estrogen receptors are in every part of your body, so it's every part of your body feels it when the estrogen isn't touching there anymore.
Okay, this is great actually because, it's like those symptoms can be related to so many different things, as you said. So you're going to have to go to your doctor and get some support and have them work through this with you, right?
Exactly.
We women, we know a lot. We can do a lot of internet researching, but we are not the experts. So if, when we walk into our doctor's office and we begin these conversations, how do we know that we have the right support? And when is it time to find the right doctor, another
Mhm.
doctor, if we're feeling like this person isn't just, it isn't helping me, or maybe they're downplaying my reality, right? So, yeah, if you could talk a little to that to give some guidance, that would be amazing.
Absolutely. And the hardest thing, Will, this may be the time you break up with the doctor that you've had your whole life or that delivered your baby, because you can't be the best at everything. And that is true. And they may have loved being that stage of your life, but they may not be prepared for this stage because they want to put their whole life into that. And that is okay. That doesn't mean they're a bad doctor or you're a bad patient. But if you feel like you go in and you feel shame by asking the question, or you feel disregarded, Even if it's been your
Right.
lifelong doctor, that is okay. That just means maybe they can take care of some things for you, but you may need someone specifically for this area of your life. And that is not wrong with you, and that is not wrong with them. I have people break up with doctors all the time, no hard feelings, because that stage in their life they needed something else. But if anyone ever makes you feel shamed, or you feel bad, or you feel like maybe I shouldn't bring this symptom up, that's a sign that relationship isn't working right now and it may be time to find someone else.
Okay, about finding someone else. Is there a database? We just talked about the fact that there's not a lot of people trained in
Yeah.
this. So how the heck are women supposed to find the right doctor?
Well, first is going onto the Menopause Society and finding who is available in your area. But there's a lot of people that's not convenient or easy. And the great thing, and telemed's not for everything, but telemed is fabulous for menopause care because you don't necessarily have to have a physical to get this part of your care. Other parts need to be seen still see a gynecologist, still see your family doctor, do all that. But for just menopause care, there are multiple telemed communities that actually have menopause certified practitioners on staff, and they're available and a little bit more available because they're easier to get in and out of. So instead of having to wait 6 months for that one doctor, you may be able to see someone within the week, which is a huge difference for your timeline. So thinking about out of the box, especially if you live rural, if you live in a community that doesn't have one, and there are many communities that don't have a menopause certified practitioner in the actual city.
Okay, that is so helpful. Thank you. Still on the doctor
Mm-hmm.
thing, women, we all have a lot of different doctors that we go to. Women, particularly, because we have the gynecologist, we have the primary care physician, we might have a
Mm-hmm.
psychiatrist. You know, there's a lot of doctors in this equation. Unfortunately, you know, holistic care is not easy to
Mm-hmm.
find. And one listener asked, you know, these people are not talking to each other, so she has to be the quarterback to her care, and yet she's not an expert. It's
Oh,
exhausting. So how does she manage the different advice that's coming in from these different doctors? How does that all work?
that is a system problem that I would love to see fixed. And other countries have it when we have shared information. Countries like England have the NIH, so they are all working with the same databases and the same sets. We are not, because we have different medical records that don't listen to each other and talk to each other, and different practice types that don't listen and talk. And we take HIPAA very seriously, so we're not allowed to bridge that gap in the society we live on. So it does put the burden on the patient. We know it's a problem. They know it's a problem. We need to make systemic change to fix it. But one thing I will
Mm,
say that can be really helpful for someone is I would say bring an extra set of ears if capable. So in systems where you're
okay,
getting the information, we know that patients get about 30% of what's going in there. So either
totally.
bring someone with you, or most medical systems, they let you print out the report from your doctors, print out the lab, and just have a binder and bring it place to place. And I know that's still putting the burden on you, and we don't want that. But as of right now, that's our best bet in the United States. And I wish it was different.
Me too. But again, we have to do what we have to do. And it sounds like we just have to. I think you gave some two great tips. Bring somebody with you, because I've had that on my own where they're giving me hard information and it's a lot to process in
Mhm.
the moment. So somebody else with you can help you understand that and process that extra 70%. And then bring a binder. Just be prepared with notes from previous scenarios and different appointments, and you know, have be able to then have a educated conversation that way as well.
And I always say this, and I hate saying it, but this is the world we live in. Prepare for your doctor appointments like you would an important business meeting, because you're the most important person in your own
Mm,
life, or you should be. And so when we come in prepared and you come in, you're going to get the best because you've thought through the questions. Just like, you go to an interview, you've already prepped with interview questions. Do the same thing. And I hate that we live in a system where
mm,
you have to prep, and I wish it wasn't, But I also think that's an important way to know what's going on in your own body, and that keeps you accountable to yourself.
Great advice. All right, spouses and partners, the male species.
Yes.
Um, they're often left guessing or making jokes, maybe because society has conditioned them to view menopause potentially as a punchline or as a female issue. And so it doesn't feel like it's an important thing for them to understand. How do we normalize this conversation at home with our partners? How can they offer non judgmental support to those going through this transition?
I think then there's multiple ways. So first of all, again, why I'm doing menopause at work, because if they go to the workplace, then they're learning it because it's part of their business strategy, and that goes home too. It's that same back and forth. So taking it out of the relationship and making it a something he needs to learn anyways, and then he brings it to the relationship. But in the relationship, it's about saying things openly and honestly. I do believe a majority of the time the disconnect is because people don't understand. And I would say we sometimes people villainize men in this situation, and it could be because their own ignorance and they don't know what they don't know. And this is just a time where we have to buckle up and say the words out loud and not feel shame around it. Um, and I would love to see less comedians make jokes about this because that's what gets in their head. They feel like it's a humor. I mean, even my mother still sends me comedian jokes by male comedians about menopause. She's like, "You talk about menopause here, this," and I was like, "This is degrading." But that's the society we live in. They don't think it's bad; they think it's funny, and we have to just work our way out of thinking it's funny, just like we've blessedly worked our ways out of saying other things in a comedian standpoint and anyone tolerating that. I mean, there was an era where um, sexual related things were talked about and everyone just thought that was funny and okay. We need to make it where people look back and go like, I can't believe people joked about menopause. That's so rude. And work towards that.
I remember those
Yeah.
times. Yeah, that's great. All right, last rapid fire. There's a lot of misinformation and out there about menopause and the transition. Um, we also have very busy lives, so it can really feel quite overwhelming to manage this health. I was going to call it an issue, and I'm like, ugh, do I want to use the word issue? But this health phase that we're going
Love it.
through. So if health phase. If women only have the bandwidth to change one or two simple things today to start feeling better, what actions will give them the biggest return on their investment?
100% guard your sleep with your life. Sleep is number one. We live in a society that says we'll sleep when we die. False. We should sleep when we live. And there's so much great evidence about having blessedly 8 hours of sleep. That doesn't mean you're lazy. It means you're protecting your body and your brain and you're helping getting all the crud out. So sleep, sleep, sleep. And again, that can be hard during the menopause transition. So caring enough to ask the questions and feeling okay asking the questions about it. Two is language. Provide yourself the language of what's going on with your body so that you can feel heard, have the information, and be able to have those productive conversations. Because the more language you have, the better care you'll have. If you go into your doctor, say, I feel off, that's a starting point, but that's not going to get you very far in the 15 minutes they're allowed to give you. So instead, come in with, like, my periods have become this regular. I have mood changes on these times, like data points. Doctors love data points. So come in with your vocabulary and with your data points, and you will have an investment return that you wouldn't believe in those visits.
Ooh, I love that. I didn't know what I was going to get from that question, and I feel like you delivered more than I expected.
Yay!
Um, Dr. Berg, thank you so much for trailblazing this space, for empowering us to take control of our health so we can keep making the bold moves that fulfill us. We don't want menopause to shut us down. We want to keep our vibrancy and our vitality. And so I'm incredibly grateful for your time and your expertise today. Thank you. Before I let you go, where can our listeners find you online and learn more about your work and the access to these resources that you've talked about today?
So first, I have a website, www.selfority.com. It's where it's kind of the container for everything I do. I write a lot. It's been published in national circulations, but I also do it on my Substack, so which is connected on my website, which is a great place to kind of get my vibe and learn about me. I am more on social than I ever thought I'd be in my whole life because we know that that's where a lot of people find their medical information. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, living my best life there. And I do try to give away as much information as possible in a way that helps people feel like they can understand it. So please, oh, and YouTube. I just joined YouTube. See, I'm trying them all.
All the
All the
things.
things.
I love it. All the things. Great. And, when this episode goes live, obviously we will get this out through all the channels and we can collaborate to make sure that people are getting the episode and then also being able to find you there as well. So, to our listeners, I want to say, as we are wrapping up today, I hope you love this episode. I really hope it empowers you and inspires you to learn a little bit more about the menopause transition in your own life and how you are personally going through some changes and shifts and be able to bring that to your doctor to support you. And the whole idea here is that to feel less alone. We are all going through this. You are not alone. The person next to you at work, sitting at the next desk, is probably going through it too. So know that we are all navigating this together, and hopefully it's going to be something that's going to be more in the stratosphere of normal, natural language really soon. And Dr. Berg is trailblazing that for us. I like to close the show, Dr. Berg, to ask listeners for a rating and review of the episode because it's the lifeblood of an independent podcast like mine. So I wanted to ask you and to give us a little bit of a fun prompt to leave in their review today. What is one word or short phrase that people who love this episode could write in their review today?
Ooh, putting me on the spot. I mean, the obvious would be menopause, but that's not cute and fun. I mean, it is cute and fun because look at us, we're cute and fun. So let's just do menopause. Say menopause.
Okay, let's
Easy
do
sneezy.
menopause. If you love this episode, let Dr. Berg and I know and comment menopause. That would be great. I love that. Drop that word in your review today, Bold Movers. Thank you again so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.